Very nice. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. Yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the concepts that I've been grappling with over the last few years, and hopefully they will, as the prior panel was talking, affect your mindset. Because mindset, to me, is also one of the most important elements of success. Now, I have taken a presentation that had 140 slides and trimmed it down to a mere 62. So I'm going to go through them quite quickly, all right? But there's lots of graphics and visuals, so hopefully you'll like them. So the first thing I usually do is I ask people, what is design? And it's really hard to answer that question because many times, I guess I can walk away from that thing, many times design is a process that's used by multiple disciplines. So, but for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to talk about design in sort of its classic sense, right? And so here are some very beautiful products. You see in the upper left-hand corner, the Eames chair. That product's been on the market for about 50 or 60 years. Pretty good lifespan, huh? It sells for around $6,000. It's very profitable for Herman Miller, okay? It's good design. All right, you have a Bang & Olufsen product. I think Bang & Olufsen probably needs no explanation. And then below it, you have a couch. And that couch is by B&B Italia. So that's a couch. If you think about buying a couch, what would you pay for a couch? You know, what would you want to pay, $1,000 maybe? That couch is $30,000. How do you get someone to pay $30,000 for a couch that isn't much different than a couch you can get at IKEA? The answer is design. Design is what does it. Now, you can get to more technical products like these, right? So, you know, let's just go right to the Tesla, okay? You know, was that the first electric car? You know, it's super successful, right? It's not the first electric car. Anybody know when the first electric car was invented? Earlier. What? Okay, that's the GM's big failure, right, with EV1. But yet much earlier, it predates the internal combustion engine car. So 1914, 1915, right in there, the first electric car. So there's nothing new about this. And as was just cited, we've had electric cars in the past that have totally failed, like the Honda Insight. But what did Tesla do differently to make this car so successful? I mean, granted, it's a rocket ship, right? If you've ever been in one, accelerating in it makes you dizzy. But what makes people part with their money for that? Design, the experience of that car. It's absolutely revolutionary. You sit in it, there's no speedometer. You've got basically a 15-inch, LCD screen in the middle of the car. All right, Apple, same thing, same story. How did they dominate the market? It was by creating a valuable user experience. How you define that value is very critical, but that's how Apple did it. And in the case of the iPhone, I show the original iPhone because everything since then has been derivative, right? The iPhone I have right now, which is quite beautiful, is just a derivation of that. So, but that happened. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. You know, Pixar, Airbnb, these are companies that put design at the forefront, okay? And they do it by integrating their teams, interdisciplinary teamwork. Why do they do that? Well, designers tend to make products desirable. Engineers tend to make products feasible, repeatable, come in at cost, right? All those details that designers don't like to think about. And then business, they're kind of managing the whole process and making sure they're on track and making sure that what gets delivered is what was promised and comes in profitable. So this is really the foundation of the integrated design and management program here at MIT. And what we tend to do is teach to that heart, right in the center. And our students, they are forced to adopt the skills of the other two disciplines. They'll come in as one of these three things. And when they leave, they're a hybrid. Now, we don't expect them to go practice engineering if they came in as a designer, but we do expect them as a designer to have a deep appreciation for engineering. Conversely, we expect the engineers to have a deep appreciation for design. And just for the record, design tends to be underappreciated. And that's why I talk about it so much. Also, I talk about it a lot because it's a big opportunity, as I kind of hinted before. Now, when we think of innovation, right, what is innovation? It's just something new, right? Could be something different. It's a change. But we assume something about innovation. We assume that it has a benefit. Is that always the case? No. We create a lot of stuff that actually is not good for us. And then we kind of pick up the pieces afterwards, right? We're grappling with that right now with social media and how we disseminate information. The quality of that information is no longer curated by people who have studied journalism and have made a commitment to integrity. That content is coming from all over the place with all kinds of motivations, right? And so we need to make sure that when we innovate, we do it responsibly. And I'm going to talk about human-centered design in a moment because that's how we do it. That's how we make sure there's integrity in that process. So another term, a product. What is a product? So I talk a lot about product. I just want you to know. I'm not talking about cars, and phones. I'm talking about an experience. Everything that we experience is a product and vice versa. We create experiences for each other all the time. How many of you think about how the other person is feeling as they experience what you've created? Okay, that I call thoughtfulness. And we need to be thoughtful about what we're doing for each other. And the way that we do that is we ask people what they want. We ask people what they're feeling. We ask them what their problems are. We ask them what inspires them. And from understanding that, we can then design experiences that inspire, that are attractive, that are desirable, that bring us together, that might even cause us to be compassionate for each other. So here's this little slide about, remember the Venn diagram, desirability, feasibility, viability. This is how I see it. They're not quite, their relationship is not even. If you have something that's desirable and it's feasible, then you probably have something viable. And I think a lot of times we rely on business to get us the viability. Really what we need to rely on is design and engineering to work together to create something that is, desirable and feasible, and you will have profit. So if you think about it that way, it changes the way you do your work. It changes your strategy. It changes the way you construct your organization. And that is that's the opportunity. Design, by the way, it's easy to have. It's easy to get. There's people who have dedicated their lives to making things beautiful from a very early age. And they're all out there. And they're all looking for really fun projects and problems to work on. There's design firms, and then there's just people doing design. You can find them all over the place. Find them and use them. That's my golden nugget of advice today. And, this is some research that was done by DMI, the Design Management Institute. They're located here in Boston. And they took these 12 design-centric companies, and they tracked them over 10 years, from 2005 to 2015. They're all from the S&P 500. And they tracked them relative to the aggregate of the S&P 500. And they outperformed by 211%. So this was a little bit of research that started to talk about this. Since then, there's been a lot more published around this, and McKinsey just published an article maybe a year or two ago about the business value of design. I highly recommend you Google that. It'll pop up. You can read it, and it's a really fascinating article. So we've talked about desirability. right? So let's break that down a little bit. What does that mean? What does desirability mean to you? So here's something that I find desirable, okay? Anybody know what that is? Ferrari. Anybody know what model it is? I just want to see how many people own one, because if you do, you'll know what it is. Okay. All right. It's an expensive model, yes, exactly. Okay, good. So that's a Ferrari. Anybody know what that is? Corvette, yeah. Anybody know what model? It's the C8, that's right. And it's a C8 Z06, okay? The reason I say the Z06 is that when you compare these two products from a functionality perspective, okay, you have almost identical performance specifications. They're about the same price. They're about the same horsepower. They both have V8 engines. They're both mid-engine cars. In other words, the product architecture is about the same. The wheelbase is even very similar, okay? They both, well, the Corvette's a little heavier. Both go 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. But there is one difference, and that's the price, right? The Ferrari, you know, is $360,000, no radio. You want the radio, it's $430,000, okay? How does Ferrari get $430,000 for a car that performs about the same as a $90,000 car? How do they do that? Well, it's like design, of course, you know, but what about, now let's just break this down. What about this design, right, you know? So why is the Ferrari design more attractive? Or why would we pay that much more for design? You know, what is it about this car that's so compelling? So, the myth, the legend, the legacy, right? Their association with racing, with Formula One, right? Yeah. What else? That's a good question. I don't know. Back in that day, the Corvette was completely different from the Ferrari. Like if you look at a 1957 Corvette, it was actually quite a beautiful, unique design. That's if you could get me that car, I'd appreciate it. This one, I'm so-so on. What else about that Ferrari makes it so valuable? Yes, right. It looks more organic. It looks more true to its purpose of moving through a fluid. Air is a fluid, right? So it's just true to that, right? You feel it. The Corvette looks like it would catch air, you know, and maybe move the air in a jerky way, right? What else does this, here's a hint, what does this say about you? Exclusive, status, yeah. And why do we care about that? Why am I wearing this jacket? Yeah. It's marketing yourself, right? I don't wear a jacket normally. I am today. And I want you to think I'm worth it, you know? If I'm in the Ferrari, you're going to think I'm worth it. So this is all done by design. You can have it. Just get a designer. Get a good designer. I mean, they come in different capabilities. So design is powerful. It generates emotion, okay? And it's a big opportunity. And the way I think about design, the value of a product, it's two things. It's functional value proposition and it's emotional value proposition. If you think that way about everything that you do, are we satisfying the customer functionally, and are we satisfying the customer emotionally? If you're doing those two things well, I guarantee you will have a very, very compelling product. So how do you do this? Well, there's processes for this, okay? So I thought I'd just show you a couple real quick, okay? So there's design-driven, and that's designing cars, and designing shoes, and designing jackets, and clothing, okay, and hats. And these are things that are really where aesthetics are driving differentiation between, Porsche doesn't need to redesign their car every year. Neither does Reebok need to redesign their sneakers every year. But they do it to cause incremental sales because That's how they differentiate from year to year and from the competition. So design-driven, technology-driven. For a cell phone, would you own that phone right now? God, no. You look ridiculous, right? That's the inventor of it, by the way. And back in the day, that phone was coveted. It was $1,200. It was $1 a minute to use, and the only people using it were in Ferraris and Porsches, okay? But that's because back then, the functionality of it, the function it performed, was its primary value proposition. Aesthetics didn't matter. So when you have emerging technologies, you'll notice that the functional value proposition is the primary value proposition. As that product matures, and so does the market, and competition emerges, the functional value proposition diminishes, and the emotional value proposition emerges as the differentiator. So there's this relationship that changes. We tend to get hung up where we think it's always the functional value proposition because we're always thinking about the product's inception. But you have to think the product and the business's entire life, okay? Biomimicry, Velcro, invented by an electrical engineer walking his dog in England, walked through some bushes, got a bunch of burrs stuck to his pants, took them home, looked at them under a magnifying glass. He saw they had hooks on them that were hooking through the loops of the threads of his wool pants. Biomimicry is where you are inspired by natural things, by nature, and you take that and you invent something new. So that's a great process, used all the time. Accidental, 3D, this is Post-it notes from 3M. This was a failed adhesive for 3M. And an admin was walking by the wastebasket, saw all this paper that was thrown out. She grabbed it and started putting notes on the paper and pinning them up around her office. The engineers walked by and saw these things. They were, what are you doing? We threw this all out. She said, it's fantastic. I can stick them up and take them down and move them around, and I can, they can create relationships between each other, and Post-its were born. So just complete accident. Many products are like that. Viagra, an accident. Okay? Penicillin, an accident. Happens in biotech all the time. And needs-driven. And needs-driven is the starting point. There's all these processes. You can use whatever you want, but don't skip this one. This is the one you start with. And this is where you identify your stakeholders, you identify your market, and you go to that market, you make appointments with them, and you meet them, and you sit with them, and you talk with them, and you get to know them, and they get to know you, and you care about them. And you leave there with an appreciation for who they are and what they experience and the problems that they have. We call that empathy. Very important part of this process. So this is what we call human-centered design, okay? And as I just said, this one's always useful. This is the go-to process. And basically, this is the process that I teach. You start here in the pink block where it says explore. And that's where you go and you talk to people, and you do those interviews and observational research. You might also do a competitive analysis and look at analogous products and all kinds of other things, right? But that's where you start. And then this step here, express at the top, that's a really important step. That's where you take the things you've learned and you communicate that to the rest of your organization. And if you don't do that step, no one's going to recognize a solution you create in the next step because they don't know what the problem is. And you're going to be very frustrated because you're like, I know what the problem is. I've been there. I've seen it. I feel it. But no one else wants to believe you because you never bothered to explain them. Actually, yeah. So that expression is really important. It's also a critical element of design leadership or even organizational leadership. More on that a little bit later. So I'm not going to go through this in too much. The other thing that really blocks this is corporate mindset, right? And that's really these three things. The culture of that organization, the way that organization is integrated in terms of how they work together, and the processes that they use to move through problems, solving problems. So I'm just going to just show you quick examples of these. Quick slide here is, I love this. This is from Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt. And it's really about that we all have a subconscious, the elephant, and then we have our conscious mind, which is the rider. And the point is that you can think you want to do something, and you might do it most of the time, but the elephant just kind of goes where it wants to. Okay? So I love the analogy, right? Well, organizations are just like that too, except the rider's leadership, and then the rest of the population in the organization is the elephant. They may or may not go where you want them to go, right? How do you prevent that? Curate the people working there, right? And that's what I call designing the organization. Change the way you do HR. Put the human in human resources, right? Hire people for character, not for skills. You can teach skills pretty easily. Don't know how to use Adobe Acrobat? No problem, we can teach you that. Don't know how to use, I don't know. You don't know how to use SolidWorks? No problem, we can teach you that too. Don't have integrity? That's tough to teach. Don't have resilience? Tough to teach. By the way, resilience to me is one of the hardest things to get in people, I found. Why not hire for resilience? Can we create mechanisms that test for resilience in the interviewing process, right? That's how you should think. Innovate all the time, okay? So that leadership is the rider. The elephant is the rest of this stuff. I just created a new school in Marlborough, Mass. Called the New England Innovation Academy. We are in our 9th month of operation. It's been a wild adventure. And just the things I'm talking to you is what I've had to do. I've had to walk the talk. And I failed for a good 6 months. It has been very, very challenging to get that culture dialed in. We are finally kind of cresting that rise. But these are the pillars of our organization: belonging and togetherness, entrepreneurship and innovation, integrated and experiential learning, and human-centered design. I won't go into them too deeply, but belonging and togetherness is really we teach the students to not only appreciate each other, but to actively show that. And on top of that, the benefit of that is that they all feel belonged, right? They feel they belong, and they feel comfortable, and they feel safe. So then, when I'm telling them to do 15 experiments, most of which we're going to fail, and we're going to laugh about it, they have the resilience to fail 15 times. And we celebrate that failure, right? And eventually, they're going to have something really special. So togetherness is the active action of including people, and belonging is really the result. What's interesting is that we were really successful making the kids feel that way, but we weren't very successful making the grown-ups feel that way. So isn't that interesting? That's a whole nother talk. Entrepreneurship and innovation, we teach them entrepreneurship. I won't go into this, I guess. I'm running out of time of a minute and 19 seconds. Integrated and experiential, they're building all the time, and they're doing all kinds of wonderful things. This is sort of a diagram of the integration of the content. We have these subjects, and they all tie in and feed each other. They're all connected. The curriculum is connected. This is very challenging and very, very time-consuming to do. And then we teach them human-centered design. So here they are working on a project, and we have the students interviewing each other. And so what we're hoping is that so human-centered design, I sort of told you this, generates empathy and compassion, makes great innovators, makes great entrepreneurs. It makes great citizens, because now they don't just believe what they're told. They go out and they learn it for themselves, and it makes great leaders. And we're trying to create heroes, basically, for the digital age. We're teaching them contemporary tools for the digital age, and we're giving them the aspiration and vision of doing good for the world while creating profit. And so I guess I'll just end with this. We are hoping that we create people with vision, with courage, and with love. And I'll let you know how it goes, or you can tune into our website and find out. So I'm going to end there. Thank you very much. Any questions or thoughts?
So it looks like Pigeonhole was not working. Did anybody get it to work? It needs a new designer. I'll walk around with the microphone. So I have a question for you. It sounded like you said you can't teach resilience, and then you told us how to teach resilience. Maybe I missed something right at the end.
Well, that's a good point, and I don't know if it works yet, because we just started.
So you're skeptical about teaching resilience, but you're
I'm
trying
not
anyway.
skeptical. I wouldn't do what I'm doing, yeah. But, I think that when you're trying to hire people that you're trying to plug into your team to create a result immediately, right? You don't want to take the 6 years it takes to go through this program, this curriculum, basically from 6th grade to 9th grade. You don't want to take that time to bring them up to speed on resilience, right? Plus, usually they're adults, and that's kind of baked in at that point. So with kids, I found, first of all, they're incredible. The work there, so what I did is I took the integrated design and management curriculum here at MIT for graduate students, and I reimagined it for a younger audience. And I got lazy. So I ended up not reimagining it that much. And we taught basically the same stuff to 6th graders. We're talking people that are like that tall, 11, and just vibrant. How did they perform? Near the same level as our graduate students here at MIT. I'm not kidding. It blew my mind. And so, they created stuff in Adobe Illustrator, and then they cut it on a laser cutter, and they assembled it, and it was gorgeous, right? And they followed this process. It was just remarkable. And so they've done that 2 or 3 times now. The outcome's been great. So, other questions?
We have one.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we have to read
Yep.
it.
So startups often have limited resource to think about design, et cetera. What advice can you give to them? Okay, so I would hire a contractor. And the beautiful thing about designers is they're usually quite autonomous. Like at a very early age, they had to learn to survive without a lot of support. And so if you go on to a site like Core 77, okay, or I think there's Behance, you can see portfolios of just designers. They could be anywhere from a year out of school to 30 years out of school, and you can peruse through their work, and you can call them up and interview them, and ask them to come in and present their portfolio and tell you about the projects they've worked on. One thing I would suggest you do is always ask, what was your role on this project? Because what I've noticed these days, especially interviewing for IDM, someone would present a product that they worked on at Philips, and really they only worked on, color selection for the, UPC code on the back of the device, okay? So you got to make sure you kind of vet that part. But they are very available, very accessible, and, it's not like hiring McKinsey, okay? It's very affordable. I hope that answers the question. Okay. Please comment on the importance of inclusion design, color blindness, disability, age, small, tall, et cetera, particularly to young designers, engineers. So there's a whole practice called universal design, and there's a lot of conventions that are published about what best design practices are with regards to designing for the myriad of human beings that are out there. Okay, so check out Universal Design, do some research on that. Another great resource is Henry Dreyfuss and Associates back in the 50s or 60s perhaps, created a book called The Measure of Man and Woman. Okay, beautiful book all about ergonomics. They measure 5% woman all the way to 95% male. So if you're ever doing anything that has to do with people fitting somewhere, And it also shows dimensions of furniture and, cockpits and, all kinds of stuff. All right. How do you convince skeptics that design thinking is a worthwhile paradigm for industries without a tradition in it? Okay, that's a really good question. So, boy, my mind kind of spins with that. So first of all, not all design thinkers or human-centered designers practice it with the same amount of passion. So, when I practice it, that meeting people, meeting stakeholders, and getting to know them, I really go deep on that. Like one time I was working on a product for the Army, and I told the Army I need to know what it is to be a soldier. And they actually put me in a live fire exercise, shipped me down to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I had to train to be able to function on a 9-person squad for 2 days in a live fire exercise carrying a 50-pound load. Okay? That's how seriously I take this. I learned what it is to be a soldier. I also got incredibly valuable insights that allowed us to innovate in a way that wouldn't have been possible. So you want to get designers that go really deep. And so to answer the question, try if you can just sort of run the experiment, lead by example. Do some of this work, okay? And then express your findings. So if you're trying to get your managers to see the value in this, go do some of it on your, just go to a coffee shop or go to Home Depot. Let's say you're doing a hardware product. Go to Home Depot, interview people in the aisles about what they're thinking. Write that stuff down. Come back, maybe take a few photographs. Come back, put a little presentation together with the insights that you got from that experience and present that to your manager and say, look at what I discovered, and there's more. Give us a little budget, give us a little time, and this is going to pay off big time. So that would be my advice there. Okay, next question. Some large corporates have a design process that has become quite bureaucratic and complex. How do you design a design process that is nimble? Okay, so that's a tough one, Robbie. So this is going to be a little, skunk worky. But what I would do is I would just sort of do some of these activities outside of the kind of scope of your normal work and create a little team that does this. It'd be great if you could get permission for that, create a little sort of design SWAT team, right? Maybe you have an engineer, you have a marketing person, and you have a designer. And you go, and so like Apple does this. Apple has their innovation team. It's tiny for Apple. It's like 18 or 20 people, okay? And those are the ones that are kind of doing all this work and coming up with these sort of new directions, new product ideas, understanding needs. Needs are opportunities. So understand the needs and opportunities will flow, okay? So if you can, make that part of the process small and separate the sort of front-end design process from what I call the implementation process. So where product development starts, it's expensive and costly and timely, right? Before that, though, you want to do all this like crazy experimentation and exploration and needs finding, and then put together a very cohesive presentation about your recommendations on what direction to take. So separate those two, I guess, is the answer. Make that, and that front end can be super nimble. And what that will do actually is make the implementation process far more efficient because there's better definition. You don't want to be exploring stuff in that product development process. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to be changing your product specifications in that product development process. You want to change those product specifications in that front end crazy design part. Okay, I like your hire for character. Makes me think little emphasis is often placed in team composition. Any suggestions there? Okay, yes. So one of the beautiful things about creating this graduate program here was that I didn't even know this, but I would be responsible for admitting students into the program. So for me, that was pretty laughable because I would never have been accepted to MIT. Okay? I was barely accepted into art school. And I was rejected from UNH. And here I was now being the gatekeeper for MIT students, right? To me, that was really laughable. But I also said this is a huge opportunity to do something innovative. So what I did is I really thought about what makes a person successful. You know, if we're going to have a successful program here, it'd be great is that if the raw ingredients coming into it were as predisposed for success as possible. That'll make us all look good. So I said, what is it that, I thought of all the most successful people I know. And drive, that was one, right? Another was vision. Do they know where they want to go? You know, passion. Are they passionate about going there? That was another. Integrity. You know, are they honest? Are they upfront? Do they see things in a way that's correct and true or benefits their particular construct of the world? Okay, we don't want the latter, we want the former. A bunch of other stuff, but this is the one that really got people's attention. What is their capacity for love? Because the thing I noticed about really successful people is they love people and they love what they do. And they love everything. And they're looking for love. They're looking for that beautiful doorknob. They're looking for that beautiful sound when you shut the door. They're looking for beautiful UI, UX. And they're remembering that. They're creating a library of beauty. And that library becomes something they draw upon. They check things out of that all the time as they create businesses, as they create products, as they create experiences. And so we started thinking about ways of how do we vet people for their capacity for love. And so we knew that we needed to do more than just look at test scores and an essay. And so we asked everyone to submit a portfolio. And the prompt for the portfolio was show us something that you are particularly proud of and show us the process you used to arrive at that place. And then we do an interview, and then we created very bizarre questions that actually, I'll tell you what they are. I mean, they're not that bizarre, One might be, what makes you angry? Do you know how many people have trouble answering that question? It's remarkable. Most people don't even want to admit they get angry. At which point I have to say, I didn't say what gets you angry. I said, what makes you feel angry, And then they kind of hedge and stuff. And then I might have to give a scenario and then say, does that make you angry? If a little boy steals a lollipop from a little girl, does that make you angry? I actually had more extreme examples, but for this crowd, I'm keeping it really generic. All right, and then we ask things like, what brings you great joy? And people would be like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, I like being with my parents. I'm like, no. I mean, joy that makes you cry, that makes you weep. And they'd have to really think about that. And then we had a question that was, if I was a magic genie and I could give you one wish, what would it be? And all of these things, the answers really are telling of character, right? It's hard to give the beauty pageant answers to these questions, okay? The genie one, maybe. But here was the question that really was the most informative. And the question was this: if you were a tree, what would you feel? And what's interesting about that question, it sounds pretty simple, but the question came to me one day, back to a doorknob. I was thinking, how do we figure out if they have empathy? Why don't we ask them if they were a doorknob, what would they feel? You're a doorknob all day long. You know, you got to really put yourself in the shoes of a doorknob. And you guys are like, that's kind of hard. Right. So I was like, okay, doorknob, not the doorknob. We won't do the doorknob. How about something that's semi-animate, like a tree? Because the doorknob's inanimate. Let's do semi-animate. We'll do a tree. And oh my God, what came out of that was just amazing. I mean, you could tell whether they had a growth mindset or not. You could tell whether they were connected to the earth or not. You could tell whether they were introverted or extroverted. You know, some people would say, I would feel one with the universe. I would feel my roots connecting deeply with the earth. I would feel the energy of the earth coming up through my roots into my trunk as sap, and I would feel photosynthesis. The sun is hitting me. I mean, it was just like these like nirvana, right? And then other people would be like, I'd feel lonely and alone and depressed and sad. And you can tell which ones we'd take and which ones we wouldn't, right? So anyway, long story short, be creative with how you do this stuff, you know, and do experiments. You know, we had the benefit of being able to run lots of experiments, and we'd modify the questions in real time, you know. I mean, we try to modify it every cycle, admission cycle, so that we had consistency, but you get the idea. Okay, so I believe time is up. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best in all that you do.